For us.
Okay. All right, it's recording now.
All right. Welcome everybody to the Propeller 2 live forum. Today we have a presentation from Jeff and Michael on the Propeller tool for Windows, and they'll be showing wireless programming. My name is Ken, and I have to step out during this meeting because I've got customer commitments all over the place, which is a good thing, and circuit boards coming out of my nose. So I'm going to let you guys roll with it, and we'll put the recording on YouTube afterwards. So I'll just come back and check in like an hour. Make sure everybody's getting along.
Yeah, either that or we've all scarpered on gone home.
And for those who are joining us for the first time, if you want to chat, I think everybody knows you could just unmute your microphone. It looks like most of them, or half of them, are unmuted. And we have a small number of people online, so make yourself at home with the chat as well.
Okay, so I've just muted everybody, so feel free to unmute yourself if you want to ask a question, or you can use the chat window, of course, to do so like we do in all the previous meetings. Okay, so we're going to start off first with some little presentation about the Propeller tool, and then go into the Wi-Fi module that's coming up. So let's start with installation. Let's see, I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So currently there is no installer for the, well, we have an old version of the Propeller tool that's been around since the Propeller 1 was released. And it is still going strong. There's still a big following for it. For the Propeller 2, we have not created an installer for it. We're just releasing alpha releases on occasion. And so, but there's a way to kind of install it. I'll show you how here very briefly, or at least I'll describe it. You can go to our main Parallax website and search for Propeller tool software, or a different way that I will show here is to go to propeller.parallax.com. And at the bottom there, click on Propeller 2, and then there's a software button at the top where you can scroll down to it. And then there's this link for Propeller tool. This is the current version out there, although the version that I'm going to show you today is slightly updated from this. And that new version will be available a little later today. So what you need to do first is actually install the original Propeller tool, which is this version 1.3.2. After that's installed, what you need to do is take the latest alpha, or the alpha version that you want, and download that and unzip the files into the installation folder of the original Propeller tool, which is usually in this program files folder under Parallax Inc. And then there should be a folder called Propeller tool. And you can look in here and you can see that I have already stored this version that I was talking about and the new version that I'm going to be showing you. And then actually both of them will run concurrently. So if there's a problem with the latest version and you're working with a Propeller 1, let's say, you could always switch back to the previous version. Or you could have multiple alphas that you run in that same location. Okay, so when you install it and run it, this is, let's see, make sure I've got the right version here. Yep. Okay, so this is what it looks like. I will expand it. Hopefully everybody can see what's on the screen pretty well. I'm going to just describe a few things about it here. On the left side, this area up here in the upper left we'll go over a little bit. It's the object view area that kind of shows you the hierarchy of your current code. And then there's a little kind of an integrated Windows Explorer down below it. This pane shows only folders. This pane only shows files within the folder that's selected up here. So you can see if I click around, there's no files there, but let me just pick a folder here. So there's there's something. And you can open up things just by double clicking on them here or dragging and dropping them to this side. I usually just double click. And by the way, if you hold Control while you move the mouse wheel up, it'll resize the font for you. That's probably a comfortable size for viewing on Zoom. And then to compile it, of course, there's this run menu up here. Compile current means compile the source that I'm currently looking at. And I just want to update status here. So you'll notice when I did that, it was really quick. There was a little splash screen that appeared. I don't know if anybody saw that. It was so brief. But it actually compiled this object, and this one refers or brings in a few other objects which show up here in this object view. So this is the structure of my of this particular project, let's say. And you can actually just single click on these to open up and see the source for those other objects that are used by this one-wire demo that I have open. Okay. There's also another view. You could hit the F8 key or select Compile View Info, where it does the same thing. It shows the little object view here and kind of gives you insight of what the actual binary image looks like. Okay, so let's see. There's one thing I wanted to show is on the bottom of this little file window. Hopefully you can see this. Right now it says all Propeller source. This is this basically filters the list to show just the files that are indicated by these extensions, currently spin and spin2. Okay, I could switch it to, for example, all files, and then you see there was a text file in there that was hidden before. And in addition, there's another couple of things up here at the top that might be helpful. This little field here shows some favorite items or things that were set by the Propeller tool as favorites, and some of the last folders that you've touched. So this is a quick way to kind of bounce around if I wanted to jump over to the library folder demos to quickly get to something. I can do it like that, and I can jump back to where I was, which was this folder. No, that wasn't where I was. Where was I? It was right there. Okay. So that's kind of a brief way to navigate around and find files and folders or objects. So one of the questions that has come up is, where do you get existing code or new code for the Propeller 2, let's say? And the answer to that is, of course, on the forums. That there's lots of people posting things there. But if you go to the that Propeller website that I was talking about, propeller.parallax.com, there's an object exchange area that dives right into the repository that site was actually driven from. And this is where I've gotten some of the files that you might see in the little Explorer window. So what I did is I actually cloned this repository, the whole repository, and then I copied all the files over to a little place right here so that I could quickly get to them. And you can see that right here. So this is that level. Oops. Okay, so it's you can also do a number of manipulations with Windows Explorer or whatnot to organize things the way that you want. One thing that John McPhalen pointed out in the previous forum was that the Propeller tool tends to, because of when it was released originally, it tends to store its libraries in the, it's actually in the installation folder. So you can see it here. This is the program files folder, Parallax Inc. Subdirectory, Propeller Tool 1.32, and this library folder. During installation, if you install it, you can choose to install it in a different place, and it'll be totally happy there. It always uses a subdirectory called library to store all the files that come with it. Outside of the program files area might be an easier way to manage your own files, put them in that library or not. In the very near future, I'm hoping this month, there will be an additional easy method to manage your own libraries or include your own user libraries or others that you grab from the forum or from OBEX, the Propeller repository online, and store them in there and tell the Propeller tool about them so that it automatically finds them whenever you refer to them in one of your objects. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm going to open up a little example here. Okay, so here's a little blink file. I need to get my filter back to where it's something that's a little simpler. There we go. Okay, so to download, once again, you can click on Run, Compile Current, and either this Load RAM or Load Flash option. This is a Propeller 2 file, so it's going to download, of course, to the Propeller 2's RAM or Flash in this case. Instead of on the Propeller 1, this would say Load RAM and Load EEPROM. So I'm going to go ahead and download this. You'll see it's very fast. I don't know, did anybody see that? You can also press, I think it's F10. So I've just downloaded like 5 times in that moment. And you can see that hopefully there's the little blink program that I just downloaded running on the Propeller 2. Okay, so it's as simple as that. Some of you may have noticed this compile top feature. This is something that is, if you're working with an object and many sub-objects, for example, during library development or some kind of driver that you're writing, it's very likely that you'll have a sort of a top-level object that refers to that, but you're doing all of your work in this low-level object. That's where this compile top feature comes into play. So for example, if I were to take John's one-wire object here, and I've got all of these sub-objects that are included and used by it, recompile this. So you see these, the one-wire and the serial and the NSN string. Not sure what he calls that. These objects are all used by this one-wire demo. And maybe I'm doing most of my work in this serial object. But if
We're
I were
not
to,
seeing your screen, Jeff.
I'm sorry.
An N string is for numeric string formatting.
Okay. Okay, so here we are. This is the demo object that I have written. It's kind of a top-level object for this project, but perhaps I'm working mostly in this serial object, fixing a bug or adding new features or whatnot. And it'd be nice to just continue looking at this level, this object, and compile from the one-wire point of view. Because normally, if I'm looking at this object and I select Run, Compile Current, usually what I'm doing is hitting F9 or F10 on the keyboard, actually. If I do that, it's going to compile this serial object, which is not meant to be a top-level application. It's meant to be a driver of sorts that you bring into a top-level application. So in order to, I don't want to have to keep clicking over here and compiling this, downloading, and then remembering to click back here and look at my code, make modifications. So what you do is you can right-click on the tab of the thing that you want to designate as the top and click Top Object File. So it'll highlight it like that to indicate that it's the top object. Also, if you happen to be looking at that folder's view, you can do the same thing here. You can right-click on a folder, or excuse me, on a file, and select Top Object. So now you see I made the end string object the top object. But I'm going to choose one-wire demo, and now, while I'm over here, I can either come up to the menu and select Compile Top, and I will just update status. You see it compiled from that same point of view, or Control F9 does the same thing. This one compiles so fast you can't even see the screen. So that's really handy when you're doing lots of development. The downside is it's easy to forget it when you've switched over to something else and be in the habit of actually hitting Control F9. And it ends up compiling something that you're not looking at necessarily. So a good indicator is to always look at this object view window to see what did it just compile. Most of the time I'm using just F9 or F10 to compile or download my objects, unless I'm in the situation where I have a demo that I want to kind of handle things on the higher level. Okay, so one thing that is new to this version, and this was thanks to John McPhalen for suggesting this, is he's been doing a lot of conversions of existing P1 code of his to P2 code. So we added this little label at the top that precedes every file that indicates whether it's a P1 file. This one's a Propeller 1 file. These are all Propeller 2 files. So that should make it a little easier to manage things if you're doing something like that. And also, if you're wondering where a file or a piece of source exists in reality, you can just hover the mouse over the tab, and it puts a little hint there that shows you the whole path.
I have a quick question. Is the,
yes.
is the P2 state auto-detected, or is it something about the file name, or is it like, how do you know it's P1 or P2?
Okay, good question. Yes, currently it is auto-detected only by the extension. So if I point at this one, you can see that it's a spin2 extension. This one over here is a spin extension. But in a future version, it will auto-detect through other means. I haven't quite decided exactly how to do that, but one idea is one that John and I are quite familiar with from the basic stamp days, where there's a little directive near the top of the file that indicates, in this case, what kind of a propeller we're targeting. So in that case, it wouldn't matter if the extension was there or not, because it would be able to parse the file and determine, oh, this is really a Propeller 2 file. And that's something to point out, that one of the sort of special things about the Propeller tool here is that you don't need to actually save source to be able to compile it. It'll manage everything that's in the tabs and treat it as if it were existing on the file system. And we want to maintain that functionality for Propeller 2 also, or both of them in this case, since it's now handling source for Propeller 1 and 2. So once we get that feature built in to be able to tell the difference between P1 and P2 source, it'll be really handy, where you can quickly create a new file, a new edit, new source tab, start typing code and compile right away without ever saving anything until the point that you're ready to save. Currently, if you try to do that, it defaults to P1, I believe, so it will cause you problems if you're working with the P2. Okay, so one other thing I should show is there's a few items in preferences that might be important for people to take a look at. You can get there by pressing F5 or selecting Edit Preferences like I just showed. And what I wanted to point out here is the syntax highlighting scheme. You can see the syntax highlighting on the background, of course, the color-coded backgrounds and some of the text is color-coded. One thing I should point out is that this version, so far all the P2, the versions that support the P2 aren't actually properly highlighting the spin2 and the PASM2 syntax, but we intend to fix that this month. It was supposed to be a little earlier than this, but we were delayed. So this is actually using the spin1 highlighting, in case anybody notices, hey, that looks funny that that thing's highlighted. But what I wanted to show here is that there's, if you don't like this scheme of highlighting, you can quickly change to none, or something simple where I think in this case, only comments are highlighted. Whoops, there we go. Or you can create a custom scheme. Maybe you don't like these shades of yellow or something on the constant block. So the way to do that is there's this custom scheme feature here. If I want to base it on something else, what you do is select the one you want, like spin, hit copy, say, yes, I want to copy this to my custom scheme, because the top three are read only, but this custom one you can change. So now that I've copied it, I can go down here and maybe select blocks and constants and say, yeah, I want that to be, I don't know, a darker yellow or something-ish. It takes some time doing this to get it right, but just wanted to show you really quick that that's how you change it. There's a whole bunch of different options in here, and I think we have some issues posted to the repository for adding a couple of more. And by the way, if you mess something up, like I've got this really pukey looking yellow here, and I just want to undo my changes, I can click this restore button, and it restores things back the way they were. You can also, after you've created a custom scheme, you can save it and call it, you know, you can give it a name on the file system, and that lets you take it to another computer, for example, if you are working between a few different computers. Okay.
I have a question. I can only change the custom scheme, or can I change any scheme that I choose?
Only the custom scheme is available to, is read-write. The other three up here are read-only. So you can select one and copy it into the custom area, but that's the only of these four that show that you can change. I can't remember if I load another scheme, if that one shows here. It might. It's been too long since I wrote that code. Yes, discard all changes. Okay, so a few other things here. I wanted to show some of the features that I tend to like about the Propeller tool. One of them is the ability to select and highlight text in rather than a method like this where that we're all familiar with, where it selects across lines and then back to the beginning. There's something I tend to do here. You'll notice that a lot of my code tends to have comments to the right of certain things. And especially in documentation, I might have little tables. So like here's an example. This is kind of a pain to write when everything is shifting around all the time. So one thing you can do in the Propeller tool is hold the, instead of selecting something like this, I'm just, you know, holding the mouse button down and dragging. You can hold the Alt key down on the keyboard and hold the mouse key down and drag and select text this way. And of course I can hit Control X, or I could have right-clicked and hit copy or cut. And I could click on another spot and then paste it back into that location. So for example, when I was writing this little document, I probably did it all as just a bunch of paragraphs and then kind of formatted it at the very end to look the way that it does now. Also, there's a different editing feature. I'm trying to find a good spot in this code to show. I will just maybe pick on this. So let's say I've got these comments to the right, and I realize that, oh, this number, it's actually too short. I need to add some more values to it. As I type, of course, it's going to push all those comments to the right, and then I have to go over here and kind of true that up. We made a mode that supports this in a more natural fashion, and if you look down here at the bottom on the status bar, it shows that I can't move oh, there it is. There's a little insert marker, and a lot of people are used to editors having an insert and overwrite feature. But we have an additional one called align, and I'm just pressing the insert button on the keyboard right now, and it's toggling between 3 modes: insert, align, and overwrite. So insert is what we were used to using right here. Overwrite is one that you're familiar with other editors. It'll just keep overwriting text and not pushing things out. Whoops. Okay, and then align is a special mode where it pays attention to what's to the right of your cursor. So as you type and add more numbers here, it's going to leave that stuff out there as long as it's spaced out far enough. And the rule is it waits until there's no more space, basically. So if I hit enter, it's going to go ahead and push that over to the right. But we find that it's quite useful for doing things like this. If you have, this is probably a poor example, but okay, so right here, we've got some code with some comments to the right. And as I'm editing it, I might realize, oh, I need to do another, maybe, or this with hex FF or something. And that keeps all my previously entered comments that are to the right of that line in place, as long as I don't bump into them with the cursor. Another thing that is handy is in the preferences, there's this files and folder tab, and you can actually specify a template file to use for new Propeller 1 or new Propeller 2 code that you're going to write. And I think we talked about this a bit in the previous forum, but what that does, I clicked away too fast. Actually, no, it doesn't show it right there. On the file menu, there it is, you can select new from P1 template or new from P2 template. So here I clicked on the new P1 template. I can also press Control-Alt-1, for example, to get to that, and Control-Alt-2. So these are just slightly different versions that come with the tool for quickly opening up some source or starting new source with some kind of structure involved. And John McPhalen has an example that I think we shared from the last forum that he uses for a lot of his objects that he's creating as a good starting point, because it's really hard sometimes just starting with a blank slate, even just getting the first little bit of code written. So we find that this feature is pretty handy. Let's see, I'm coming up on about 30 minutes here. I will cover a couple other things, and then we'll transition over to Michael. So there is this, trying to find it, of course. There it is. Okay, so some of you may be familiar with the Parallax serial terminal. It's a separate little program that is, it comes with the Propeller tool installer, and it's just a simple serial terminal for interfacing to the Propeller or other devices. One of the things that I often forget about is you can press F12 while in the editor, and it will open up the serial terminal. It doesn't open up by default when you download something that has serial code in it, unfortunately. but it is handy to just be able to press the F12 key. And if you could see here, it's actually on the port with my propeller, and it's apparently receiving something, but not at 2 megabaud. I don't know what baud rate it's actually using in this case. But anyway, so F12 is kind of a friendly thing for that. Now that might change, that behavior might change because of the debugging features that are being added to Chip's Peanut software, which we're going to integrate into here. I'm not sure yet if we will kind of disconnect the Parallax serial terminal from that. I haven't even really put much thought into that yet. But we might maybe assign a separate feature or a separate keyboard shortcut to open up the debug terminal if need be. But the way that Peanut works, if you've seen it, as soon as you download code with a debug instruction in it, it opens up the debug windows automatically. And that's the kind of functionality that we intend to add to the Propeller tool here shortly.
Hey, Jeff.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just thinking of something. So your editor, it stores everything as spaces, right? There's no such thing as a tab character. There's no 09 anywhere in these files.
That's correct.
And that permits all these special things. I've been getting used to that lately with Delphi. I used to hate it because I'd hate to, like, no matter where you click on the screens, there's your cursor. It never made sense to me, but I understand now, you know, what the idea is, and it works okay. So for high-level languages where you don't want, you know, 8 space tabs, it's kind of nice. So I had some questions about this. You know, this issue of compatibility across file systems, like in DOS or Windows, we use carriage return plus line feed, and then old Mac was just carriage return, and then new Mac and Linux is just line feed. I've made some rules when and I can, maybe you even saw it, but when I load files into Peanut now, I take note of what the format is, strip everything down to just carriage return internally, and then a 0 at the end of the file. And then I restore based on what I loaded originally. So if I note it, I put it back into the same format. So should we do that? I mean, I know that this is the PC program, but my next question was going to be, is there any way to take this? I suppose not, but to run this on another platform, is there any way to, is there anything out there that can just create like a fake Windows environment in which this thing can run that can be encapsulated? Yes. Wasn't there something called Docker that did something like that?
You can use Wine on Linux.
Yeah, Wine for Linux is
and that popular. Also works on Mac too, I think.
Okay. And I think there's another way on Mac, or a couple of different ways, little like virtual machine systems. So yeah, definitely that's an issue that I like the way that you solved it. It sounds like that's the best way to do it, because we're going to always have people coming from, you know, different platforms sharing code between the tools. So
I need to put a little. I need to make a little submenu that lets you see what mode you're currently in based on what was last loaded. And then you can have the ability to change it to one of the other formats so that when you save, it goes into the format that you want. But anyway, but that's going to be more significant if we can get this thing to reliably run on other platforms through Wine or whatever. But wasn't there something you were telling me about called Dockers that just completely encapsulates on an application level everything so that it becomes sort of platform independent?
Yes, yeah, Docker is a system that's used a lot for, especially in the IT world, for servers or for development systems. In fact, we're using it that way for both of those cases, where you can kind of configure a system and encapsulate it, and then launch it or new instances of it at any time. It's another take on the whole virtual machine concept. I've never thought about running Propeller tool inside a Docker image, but I mean, there's no reason that can't be done.
Yeah, my understanding was that it gets rid of the necessity of like a Windows emulator and just replicates the app functionality on something that's less dependent on platform.
Yeah, I don't know
You
if
wouldn't,
there's,
you
go
wouldn't
ahead.
be able to run a Windows app in Docker directly. You'd have to convert it or have the Docker be a Windows virtual machine.
Yeah, I think usually the way it works is Docker is like a VM Lite, and it was born on Linux, and it's really comfortable on Linux. And on other platforms, you have to run a VM. Well, you used to have to run a full VM and then run a Docker daemon inside that. So it's more on the Linux side than or Linux side than on the
Okay. I see.
Yeah, that's true. And also, we have done some tests. I think we actually did run some tool. I'm not sure if it was Propeller tool or something else, but through a Docker image, the access to the serial port becomes problematic, or at least when we were experimenting with it, which was
Yeah,
maybe
the serial
a
port's
couple years
always
ago.
the problem.
Yeah.
Well, just
also-
hardware access at all in Docker
Well,
is
yeah,
tricky.
like your display driver might also be an issue. The point of Docker is to isolate Docker containers from the underlying hardware for security reasons, which also means getting to that hardware is tricky. Like you can't, for example, write directly to a disk. You need to use a disk interface layer to get to it. So there are still some hoops involved with that.
It's a lot simpler to just use Wine
Yeah,
to run the Windows app.
I agree.
It's true that in all cases, though, if you're running Wine, you still have to have a Windows license. Is that true?
I don't think so.
I don't remember that ever actually being true, or at least I was never forced to. I've used Wine before. I never had a Windows license.
You had to get the Windows image from somewhere, didn't you?
Doesn't use a Windows. It doesn't use a Windows image. It emulates the Win32 API.
Exactly.
And simulates the OS. It doesn't use an actual
Oh,
Windows run.
It live translates Windows layer calls to Linux calls.
So instead of the like a VMware or Parallels, it's actually translating.
Yeah, it's not a virtual machine at all.
And it's per call. It doesn't do like a compile or something like that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I probably confused the situation, saying it's another take on virtual machines.
Doesn't have interaction.
Hey, can we ask you guys, I don't know how we can do a poll here, but how many of you are partial to Linux or Windows, or who has preference? Okay, let's see. Well, we see some people's video. Who likes Linux? We got 3 hands up. I would probably like it, but I just don't know enough. Okay, Robert, Bob, Lawrence, you like Linux.
Chip, you would definitely like Linux.
Yeah.
Yeah. You say Linux, but that also means Raspberry Pis. It means smaller embedded systems. It means the Mac OS. It means they're all the same.
I like Linux.
And so once we have something that runs there, you'll be able to get it.
Chip, you would like the attitude of Linux and the freedom it gives.
Yeah. Now, do your tools support cross-compilation for Mac OS, your compiler?
Well, the compiler is actually written in 386 assembler.
Well,
Doesn't cross-compile. You don't target a Mac, you target the Propeller, so you're always cross-compiling.
No, I'm sorry, that's the wrong question. The tool that's building the tool that we're demonstrating today, does it support cross-compilation for Mac OS?
So I can answer that. The version of the tool that we're using does not. However,
the latest version does.
The latest version does.
Gotcha.
So you might ask, why aren't we just automatically doing that? The problem is the libraries that we're currently using, things that are for the editor,
Your GUI
a whole bunch of stuff, uses some features of the Delphi language that are no longer supported in the current version, and especially not supported, or maybe they're deprecated, but still supported, but they are not supported. Some of those features are not supported at all for cross-compilation. So what we need to do, of course, is go through our code and modify it heavily to be able to do this. One of the main things is Unicode support. In the Propeller tool, we built it back at a time when there really wasn't a whole lot of Unicode support available. And in fact, the Delphi libraries didn't have, well, they had just kind of a kooky form of Unicode support. And so I actually did a whole lot of manual work to support it ourselves because we wanted that for, particularly because of the Parallax font that we had built, we wanted to integrate that.
Am I correctly seeing that these are UTF-16? That's what you mean by Unicode?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So that's the main thing on the top of my mind. I'd have to go through and kind of rip that stuff out that I did and replace it with, you know, the proper way nowadays to do it.
Well, Jeff,
Hopefully UTF-8.
Yeah, UTF-8 is on the list. Samuel, you had a question? Maybe not. We hear you.
Jeff, I have an idea.
Okay. What's your idea?
Yes, I have an idea. You could use Qt. I don't know if you are familiar with it. Qt and WinCW, I think. You could cross compile to Windows, Linux, and you can implement UTF-8, UTF-16. You can even use XML. I did all of that with Qt,
Yeah, but
and it is a
Qt
great
is
tool.
C++.
So you could try to port. Probably you will have to design the whole GUI again.
Right. Yeah. That and what Roy said holds true there too. That it's written in a different, or Qt applications are written in a different language. This is basically Pascal rather than C++. So it would still represent a big amount of engineering effort to make the change. And we'd like to do that. I still, you know, have dreams of doing that. I hope that
what language?
I missed the last part of your question.
It's Delphi, which is Pascal with objects.
Yes.
Have you looked at Ray Allen's spin edit, where he basically remade Proptool but using Qt, I think, or some other, or just MFC, like straight Windows API?
Yeah, I've looked at it, but I haven't used it a whole lot yet. I was really interested in it, though. Do you think it uses Qt?
No, I forgot that he wrote it. It uses the Windows API directly, so it's not really cross-platform.
Okay.
But it might be easier to port from that code to something cross-platform, just because it's all C++ already. And the Windows API calls are fairly easy to translate into something like Qt or another free Windows library. Not Windows, but windowing library that works across platforms, like WX or Qt.
Aren't there hooks for Qt for other languages as well, like Python and others?
Not that I mean, there might be some add-ons that let you wrap Qt with Python, but it's still the C++ libraries underneath.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. Well, we're getting, Chip, did we get all your questions answered?
That could be a solution.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to Michael because we have about another 20 minutes of presentation to show. and then we can open it up for further questions after that. So Michael, you should be able to take over sharing. And you're currently muted.
Yeah. Yeah, let's give this a try then. I'll try and screen share. And there we go. Now, I can't see what you can see, but hopefully you can see a picture.
Yes, we
Yep.
see the P2 eval WX adapter.
Excellent. Okay, just interestingly for Jeff, there's no green border this time.
I need that.
It's gone. Oh well, never mind. So I'll just assume that you can just see one screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, but we'll just assume it's all fine. So
It's the whole monitor, it looks like.
yeah, that's fine. That's the easy way of doing it. Okay, so I'll just go through this. My name's Michael, as Jeff said. Thanks, Jeff. Some of you may have seen me on the forums as Von Sarvash, trying to keep the place clean. But this demo is really the first step towards wireless programming for the P2. And to do that, we've created this small P2 accessory called the WX adapter, which you can see there without the headers. And this can be used with the latest P2 eval board from the Rev C edition onwards. So I'll just go ahead and show the board. Actually, before I do, I should say a special thanks to David Betts, as he created the Parallax Wi-Fi firmware in the first place. I've tacked on some functionality here, which you'll see in a minute, but really David deserves the credit for making all this possible. So yeah, okay, so let me start with getting rid of that image, which hopefully worked, and sticking this live camera image up there. So hopefully you can all see this P2 eval board now. And I just wanted to show you the required parts. So essentially it's a P2 eval board, power cable, which I've got connected to a 2 amp hub, but it could just be a standard phone charger as well. The little P2 adapter and a standard Wi-Fi module. So that's all you need. And I'll just plug those back together.
Hey, Michael.
Yeah.
You saw the two boards. Maybe I missed what you were saying, but one of them takes some module that we make, and what does the other one take?
Okay, so there's two boards. One of them is the Wi-Fi module from Parallax. This one here, the Wi-Fi WX module. And the other one is just a small adapter, which goes between the eval and the Wi-Fi module.
Oh, wait, was that the same circuit board? We were just looking at the top and bottom. You had two of them laid down?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, all right, I get it, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we made this little circuit board. So you've got the, can you see my mouse, by the way, on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, I don't want to be pointing and then, so yeah, so down the bottom, you've got the standard P2 header format, Wi-Fi module plugs in there. There's a silk at the top to show the orientation for the Wi-Fi module. And then in the middle here, these are unpopulated, but they're handy just to put headers in if you want to for, for debugging, for tapping into the serial signals or whatever you want. A couple of the signals we didn't connect. We left pins 2, 3, 4, and 5 unconnected on the P2 header. And I think it's ASC, RTS, and maybe debug is not connected. Anyway, there's a couple here that aren't connected. They're not crucial for use, but we kind of figured by providing you with the holes here as well, it's pretty easy to, pop a jumper or a resistor over if you want to hook those into the unused pins. And actually, while we've got this up, I may as well just remark on this reset icon here. So this matches the reset icon which appeared on the P2 eval Rev C board. So you can get the orientation from there. So essentially, it's tapping into the eval's reset signal there. You can actually use this module on any of the eval header pins, and it won't do any harm. So it's protected against the 5-volt signal that you would get, on the other headers. So that's no problem if you want to use this somewhere else, just for data transmission or whatnot. But yeah, let's get rid of that just for a minute. So,
quick
yeah.
question. Can the adapter be used with a Rev B eval board?
Well, you can use it on any of the header pins for data only. You wouldn't have the reset functionality without some jiggery pokery. So you'd have to kind of sort that bit out yourself if you wanted to use it for wireless programming. On the Rev B, actually, the DTR reset signal is there. It's just unpopulated. So you could in theory solder in a header there, and then use a jumper wire. Yeah. It's not as clean and tidy, but yeah, it's kind of doable. So make sure you've still got sight of that. Yeah, so that just plugs into there. And I just connect the power. I get that the right way up. Always a good start to get it the right way up. Yeah, so green light is on, so that's good. Power light is on for the Wi-Fi module, that's good. And now we've got the blue blinky of the Wi-Fi module, so it's connected to my access point. So with that, we would, he says, searching for the page which has the access point. Here we go. Yeah, so that's now connected. So this is using special firmware, which I'll share the link for after I finish talking into the chat. This will be on the Parallax GitHub at some point, but we've got the compiled image available today if anyone wants to play with this thing. And you'll see straight away there's a new menu at the bottom called P2 Drop Loader. So that's the interesting thing. But should I show you anything else first? Yes, maybe. So the one thing you need to change is if this was a new or the standard Parallax module, you just go here, you'd browse to the updated firmware, which will give you, and click update. That would upload or update, sorry, your Parallax standard wireless module to be the P2 edition. And then you'll check back on the home screen to make sure you've got P2. You want to go into settings. You can set the loader baud rate anything up to 2 meg, which is what we've got here. I think it's 115/200 by default, as they're shipping for the P1 usually. But you can up those if you want to. But the most important thing to change is this one here, the reset pin. So because we're using the Wi-Fi SIP module, the Parallax wireless SIP module, it doesn't have RTS or DTR, it doesn't have DTR available on its breakout header. So we use the CTS signal instead for reset. So we just change that to CTS and then pump down here, save settings, or save to flash even to make it permanent.
Hey, Michael.
Yeah.
Are these modules? I don't really know. Or maybe you said, but are they based on the ESP? Is it 8266?
Yeah.
And the ESP32 is the newer one. Okay, so it's an 8266.
That's right.
I think that's the part number. Okay.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So set your settings, and then once you're done there, we can just go to this drop loader. Now I'm just searching my screen to find a directory. Oh, it was underneath, wasn't it? And just zoom that out the way. Let's get the image out the way. Yeah. So let's just resize that. I think you can all guess what's going to happen here. So, you know, the normal process, you'd go into your Propeller tool or Peanut and just create your code. You know, here's one that I made earlier. Well, let's start with something else. Toggler, that'll do. And just click F8 or go File, View Info. That then brings up this object info screen from which there's a save binary file. Now this has just been fixed by Jeff on this version of Proptool. So the save binary file feature is now working. And we just click that and save the binary file. Yeah, okay, let's overwrite the one I've already saved. And now we're done with that. And then the binary file is now here and we can just drag and drop that. Oh, hang on, before I do that, maybe we should have the Propeller image. Let's see if I can squeeze it all in this tiny screen. Okay, toggler, that's the spin, that's the binary. Okay, we just drop that in there, just get it in, and as you can see, the lights are flashing. So it's as simple as that. It's quite a fast upload, as you could see, although that's obviously quite a small test file. But really, that's as simple as that. There's one other demo I had here, which I could plug in, and that's maybe a bit more interesting. Let's drop that one in. And maybe I have the other pins assigned. I should have opened Propeller tool first and looked. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I had the other pins defined for the other side. So we'll go back to that one, and then we'll go back to that one. So the idea is that it obviously demonstrates how you can now wirelessly program the P2, and it saves you having to have a USB connection to the computer. It's quite fast. It's easy, quite easy to use. In the future, Propeller tool obviously would like to do this directly, but you know, it's a solution ready to go that you can use for programming wirelessly.
Yeah,
I don't think there's much more to show, really. I think questions, really.
Yeah, I just typed in the chat for those that that are looking at the chat window that we'll make this work directly with the Propeller tool also in a similar fashion to how we did for, I think it was Proploader and the Blockly Prop launcher software, where you can just select the you know, the wireless port as your COM port and download directly to it. And hopefully the same interface will be there so that others can make their editors do the same thing, use the same wireless.
Hey, I have a question. This is really cool, but what would it take to make it so that, I mean, is there any software that bridges like a COM port in the Windows API to this 8266 so that we could open it just as if it were a COM port? Or are there problems with that concept? So I'm just thinking then we could get the benefit of all the debug stuff too if it's all connected the same way. I mean, when you're thinking about connecting it into the tool, are you envisioning that we have another protocol that we use instead of like a COM connection?
Yes. So for example, with the Blockly Prop launcher that can wirelessly download to the Propeller 1 using the Propeller 1 protocol or a modified version of it, we also support debugging there too. So it's pretty natural on the launch. Well, the interface for that is the Blockly Prop solo website. There's a little COM port or a little port drop down. And when there's a wireless module nearby that's already been, assigned to your access point, it shows up in that drop-down list. So you just select it as the port. And it's, for all intents and purposes, from the user perspective, it's just another serial device. It just happens to be wirelessly connected and essentially network connected.
So so instead of like a COM port, it's like a MAC address. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. And we give it in the firmware that we have on the Wi-Fi module. You can give it your own name too, so you can kind of give it a friendly name, which is really helpful especially if you have multiple of these wireless devices that where some of them may be on at the same time.
Yeah,
such as in a classroom.
The serial code, the code in the app that talks serial, it's really the heart of it is no more than like probably 30 or 40 lines of code anyway, right? So to use another type of interface is really not a big deal. There's no reason to make it look like a COM port, but we could get the same functionality out of it, which is important.
Right. Yeah, so in that software, we present it in the same fashion to the user to keep things nice and simple. But behind the scenes, of course, it's using network protocols rather than serial protocols.
Yeah, so what does that look like? I mean, how do you I know that the network activity is packetized and sent out and received, but do you have to packetize it or do you just send it and then it does all that for you?
Let's see. In most cases, you just send it. You don't have to actually packetize it. The libraries that we're calling actually do that for you. However, for like the Propeller 1 to implement the successful downloads over a network interface where you could have all kinds of funny little delays and stuff.
Right.
We had to do a crazy amount of work to get that working. For the P2, it'll be a heck of a lot easier. And so we created our own little fast downloader that is more lax on timing. It's acceptable of lags. And so we use a little protocol there that we created for it.
And the P2 firmware too was designed to accommodate this kind of thing where, you're dealing with like readable ASCII text, nothing that's funny stuff with weird characters, because some things just filter that stuff out and you can't even get that data. So we kept it really above board and obvious.
Right. Yeah, I expect it to be very natural to get the P2 working in the same fashion that we got the P1, where it took probably hundreds of hours to get the P1 working wirelessly in this fashion. It's probably just, a tenth or 1% of that for the P2.
Yeah, that's really great. Well, that'll be nice. We could even make a smaller module that has the 8266 and everything on there just to consolidate, right? If we wanted to. Or build one with an ESP32.
What do you mean by module? You mean a P2 module?
Yeah, what Michael made here was like a board that does the, mechanical translation between the two, between that header we have on the P2 eval and then that module. But well, I guess that's a fine solution. We could consolidate it. Maybe there's no need to. It's just kind of for experimentation. But ultimately, it would be nice to have all that hardware all on one board.
Perhaps a version of the blade.
Yeah. And what you've probably, Chip, have you seen what we did with the Propeller activity board? Where
I don't think so.
Okay, so there's, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So this little header here, which is actually an XB header, and the original versions of this product were meant for using XBs, but we made this Wi-Fi module fit into the same socket. So you just plug the Wi-Fi module in here, associate it with your access point.
I see.
And then now you have wireless programming. That's how I use it most of the time.
And that same header is in the S3, and I mean, it just makes it super simple to add that Wi-Fi WX.
Yeah, and it also means that in this case, people don't have to, you know, pay for extra hardware that they might not be intending to use.
Right.
And it gives the option still of using an XB, one of the XB modules as well.
So what does the procedure look like for connecting your machine to this wireless, this Wi-Fi point?
Your computer?
Yeah.
So most of the work is done on the wireless side itself to associate it with the access point. And one thing that's absolutely important is that the access point you're using has to not isolate devices that are on that access point from each other. So for example, if you go to Starbucks, you might have a problem because I believe that most of them on their free Wi-Fi are isolating devices, you know, to protect people from each other. So it wouldn't work in that case, but on a home network, it's natural. Usually, you know, all the devices you add to your access point can see each other. And then as long as your computer, your host is on the same network, the same subnet, it'll be able to find it. And it has a little discovery protocol that it just goes and checks on the network, hey, is there a Wi-Fi module there? And if there is one, it responds, and then they chat for a moment, and then they know about each other.
So it needs a router to facilitate this, is that right? Or can your PC just talk to this thing directly?
No, it needs an AP.
Yeah, it needs an access point, which usually has a router built in.
At the moment, that's the case.
I was going to say the ESP series can act like their own access point. So couldn't you do a point-to-point from the PC?
Yes, yeah. Good point, John. Thanks for reminding me of that. In fact, that's how we tested it originally, is just directly connected to it. The downside of that is that on most devices, you only have...
Oh, you lose your network connection.
Yeah, you lose your network connection, or your internet connection is what people usually notice. So, for example, we could take our a smartphone or a tablet and associate it directly with the Wi-Fi module's self-serve access point. And you can do downloads and communication with it, but you can't get to the internet anymore.
Right.
So
this is just a software issue, and couldn't PCs in theory talk to any number of systems?
Yes. Yeah, in fact, well, most PCs have the ability to have multiple network cards or some, you know, connections to different networks. So it's a lot more natural on a Mac or Linux or Windows box.
Now, I have a lot of IoT devices, many of which are offering these same web backend UIs. I'm assuming that you didn't mention it. You said you can rename the module, but I'm assuming it fully supports DHCP. So
the module, yes.
So I can serve fixed IP address and stuff like that, like I do to all the rest of my gear.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I believe it has a static mode also that you can opt into from the configuration page. Michael, you're can you click on the settings tab? And let's see.
I think you're thinking of the networking.
Networks tab. Sorry, you're right.
Yeah. I mean, I was just going to say actually that there's two. I didn't show it, but there's two ways to associate, or sorry, to configure the Wi-Fi module to connect to your network. The first way is with a piece of spin code. So you just connect by USB to your eval and upload some spin code, which programs the credentials for your network into the Wi-Fi module. So you do that once and then you're done. That's the easiest way because you just type your credentials into your Propeller tool and press upload. And then it's stored in the Wi-Fi module. The other way of doing it is using the access point feature, which if I point here on the side, well, I won't bother pointing. Oh, hang on, let's just drag this image up here. So on the side of the Wi-Fi module's header, there's a little egg with AP above it. If you press that with something, paperclip or something, 4 times, just to short out the egg, it will put the wireless module into access point mode. And as Whit mentioned earlier, the S3 does the same. So people are probably used to doing that with the S3 for the first time association. Once it's in access point mode, you can browse to this module's network. You'll find it come up in your list of available Wi-Fi networks on your phone or your tablet with the module name, which which is stored in. By default, it'll be WX dash and then some hex bytes, but you can change that to whatever you want. Once you connect to the network, the IP will be a fixed 192.168.4.1, I think. Anyway, you just browse to the Wi-Fi page, and then you can interact, and you could use it that way as an access point, which is what Chip mentioned earlier. Do you need to have a router? No, you don't. You could just put it into access point mode, connect to it, and upload code. But once you're connected, you could go to this menu that I've got on the screen now, the Wi-Fi networks menu, and you can change the Wi-Fi mode from station to station plus access point. Hopefully there's no embarrassing Wi-Fi names in my area. But anyway, this is now going to scan the local area for Wi-Fi networks and present us with the list. And then we can choose the one that we want to connect to, type in the password if needed, and then connect. It's not finding any, which is interesting.
You would use that method first and then connect the WX port to your local router. Is that it? First configure it as an access point and then change it to be a client?
Yes, that's correct. That's typically, or that's exactly how it's done. In fact, from when you receive these modules from Parallax, they are in, I believe they're in the mode that we're showing on screen right now, the station plus AP, or they might be just AP. But that allows you to directly connect to it. In fact, I've done it many times on my smartphone, just browsed to the 192.168.4.1 IP address in like the Chrome browser or some other browser that you have on your smartphone. And then this page shows up, and then I can go in here and configure it for my my home network access point, for example. One other thing I should say is that Chip, or to everybody, my development machine is hardwired into the network, so essentially connected directly via Ethernet to the access point. But of course, the Wi-Fi module is wirelessly connected to that same access point, and there's no issue there. It shows up on the network. It can see my computer can see it, and I can download to it and still access the internet, which is a nice thing to have.
Is Bluetooth
about the encryption that this module supports? So it supports web, WSKPA, I don't know what it's called.
It's
what kind of encryption does it support?
I think it's WPA.
Because I think I have my.
I don't remember.
I have my network configured. It's not web. It is proprietary. I don't remember. My memory is failing.
Okay.
But it's the most recent.
Yeah, I think it supports WPA2, if I recall.
Does it support that?
Yeah, there is a
Yes,
The
yes,
manual for the
exactly.
Wi-Fi module describes this and what the limitations are that you need to be within. Like the biggest thing is that you have to be on the same subnet, which is usually a typical case for a home user, for example, in order to communicate with it, because it won't route across subnets.
But I can configure my subnet, right? For example, I have 192.168.10, then the can be 1, 2, 3, the rest octets. So can I configure the IP of my net and
it certainly supports DHCP. It looks
for example, I'm saying this, for example, it's in 6.8.
I missed that last thing. Can you repeat that?
So, for example, you have your router, right? You first configure it as an access point. You do the configurations to connect to your router, but you have to configure the IP in order to be in the same in the same network as the router, right? For example, if my router serves the network started by 192.168.10, and then the last octet can be any number, right?
Yeah.
So the W export should be able to.
Yeah, you can. Well, the module will take an IP address by DHCP. So the module will be a client to your DHCP server if your local home router has DHCP service. It will take an IP address. But if it doesn't, then in the networks page you can set the IP address that you want to use. I think,
I was
or maybe
looking
not
for
in
that
this
option,
version.
but I can't remember. I thought it was there, but I don't see it.
Yeah, if it's not here, we do have it, but just not in this version of the code, because we added that functionality for the badge module, which uses which has this Wi-Fi module embedded.
Okay.
Yeah. And actually, to answer your previous question as well, to answer your previous question as well, the two we've got a good delay here. Should I go? Well, just very quickly to answer your previous question, the module accepts WEP and WPA, so it'll auto accept both, and WPA too, I believe.
Okay. PSK2. So what would be the correct modes? STA plus AP, and it would work forever, or do I have to change it again?
Yeah.
For instance, once I have the WX configured.
Once you have it configured for your access point that you want to use it on, you can switch it to just the pure STA mode, which is a little more secure, because then it won't be serving its own access point that somebody else could get into. So it's a good idea to switch it to just pure STA after it's configured for your access point. But you can certainly leave it. It won't hurt anything as long as there's no malicious people in the area, to leave it in the STA plus AP mode.
I can have it reset the board, right? Okay, but having that configuration, I can always reset the board, right? For instance, if I was
I think we've Did we lose
Sorry,
him?
I didn't hear that entirely. Samuel, could you repeat that?
Wi-Fi password or something. Sorry?
We didn't hear your question or your comment.
Okay, I'm going to repeat. Imagine that I have the board configured, correctly set, and then I have some issue with my router or my password, and I configure the new network with the other settings. So do I have the possibility to reset the board and reconfigure it again?
Yeah, very, very easily. If you tap on the if you tap on this little golden egg here with the AP box around it, with a paperclip or something, yeah, you just tap on there 4 times, and it will put the module into access point mode. And once the module's in access point mode, you can connect to it from your mobile phone or your tablet, and you can connect to it directly. So then it doesn't matter what your router's not involved at that stage. You can connect to it directly as an access point. You can access the, oopsie, oh gosh, where's it gone? There it is. You can access the networks page, and you can configure the module to your new IP address or your new network. So yeah, it's no problem.
Yeah, that feature is also available on, say, the PABWX board through the reset button. If you simply push the, oh, it's up here, push the reset button, I guess it's 4 times on that as well, it tells the WX module or the Wi-Fi module to go into that special AP mode. So you're always able to recover it. And this happens with us when we move around. Like if I go from my home office to the Parallax office, the Wi-Fi module doesn't connect, and I just recover it using the same technique. I usually grab my smartphone and just browse to its little configuration web page and then set it up for whatever network at the office that I want. Stephen asks, what firmware are these running? So on our repo, we have on our GitHub, I'm sorry, we have a repository called Parallax-ESP, I believe is the name. And that's the firmware that's running on this, although right now the one that Michael has, I'm not sure that version is sitting there, but the version that comes from Parallax is driven by that firmware. It is, I don't remember exactly where it originates from, but we had David Betts work on it with us. He did a whole bunch of work and kind of produced this little API that we collaborated with him on so that we could do a number of things with the module. You could also, of course, run any of the existing ESP firmware that's out there on the net by overwriting it. But you can always return back to our version through, I don't remember if there's a direct connection that's always available on that module for reprogramming the firmware wired. But we made a way also, you can actually program it right on this board with just a couple of jumpers from here over to the Propeller and a little Propeller application that I think Michael was alluding to. I just know that it's available in a DIP and a SIP version. I'm not sure if you can reprogram it in the SIP version.
Yeah, you can.
You can? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you're showing the pinout right here. Wasn't even looking.
Yeah, and I've got the link here to share once I finish screen sharing. With the screen share, I've lost the chat window option, but once I come off screen share, I'll put this into the chat window. So
Okay.
if anyone wants to download the firmware, they can grab it from there. I seem to have totally lost network connection on my office router for some reason. Maybe switching between access point and station too many times has upset the thing. So I'm not quite sure what's happened there. Anyway, c'est la vie. But it can be recovered by using a standard Parallax prop plug or pretty much any other USB serial adapter. You can reprogram the firmware. It's very, very simple to recover. You can't really do much wrong.
In the chat window, Whit says, great demo, Michael.
Thanks, Whit. Well, of course, I've just realized why. Okay, I know what I've done wrong now. Yeah, while I was fiddling with the settings on the screen up here before, I changed the module to access point only mode, which of course is a big no-no because now I can't connect to it without changing the settings. But I'll just grab my phone and connect to it and do that. So yeah, I just realized what I did there. That was a silly thing. Yeah, there it is. So it comes up on your phone and you can just connect to the WX service. Yeah, if you select AP only mode, then you've got no way in apart from using some sort of Wi-Fi device. Okay, so that's now connected. I can just click on there. It gives you the option for manage router. So I just press that. Oopsie. There you go. And it brings me straight into the Parallax page. So now I can go into that network menu and recover things. Except my phone is popping up with things I don't need.
To give people a feel for it, the hardest part, of course, is getting it connected to your access point. That could be as easily as what Michael just demonstrated here. What was it, a 60 or 90 seconds or so? Or it might be a little bit more troublesome if you have a different type of network access point. For example, in various corporate or educational situations, there's things thrown in there like guest isolation, and that causes it to not work. So that's why I pointed out that the access point must not hide people from each other, and you must be on the same subnet. But if you're within those two limitations, it works great. I've done lots of experiments where, you know, I've had the module clear on the outside of my house that still had a Wi-Fi connection and was able to reprogram it to my heart's content with no problems. It just seems to work.
That's really neat. Hey, so about what does the code look like that talks to, because what you're really doing is you're talking to the internet protocol, right? And you're calling out this thing's MAC address once it's on the network and everything. And I mean, theoretically, that point could be anywhere on the earth, right?
Yes, theoretically, as long as, I mean, by default, of course, it's getting a local IP because that's what typical access points dish out with their DHCP. But you can, if you have a configurable router, you can do this port forwarding feature to essentially put it on the net at a specific IP address, you know, that belongs to you, and at a specific port, possibly, and then you can access it from across the net.
And does it make your software any different to do that, or is that just a configuration thing on the network side?
It would make the software a little different. In fact, we had accommodated for that, but I don't recall. I think the Blockly Prop Launcher has a setting that you can go in and you can change the, say the subnet mask that it uses, and I think the port, so that you would be able to access it in a situation like that. The default is set to what is most common.
Right. Okay, so really on our side for our software, there's not much. It's just some configuration. The blow-by-blow protocol is not any different, right?
Well, you have to, instead of opening up a serial port, of course, and just spitting data out, you have to open up a network port,
right,
and establish a connection, say like through TCP/IP.
But then that connection's kind of agnostic in a way. It doesn't know it doesn't care what's on the other end, right?
Right, right. Yeah, it doesn't know. It's just sending data to an endpoint. And so what we did in, I can't remember, I guess it was the Blockly Prop launcher, which supports both serial and wireless, or network, I should say, programming. There's a layer that handles the actual communication. So there's say a serial class that I wrote and a wireless class, for lack of a better name. And then the high level stuff just deals with the data, and it just calls the right method within each of those two classes to send data or receive data from it. So for all intents and purposes, the main part of the application is oblivious to it. It's just looking at the data as if it were, just raw values communicated to it through the serial port.
So Jeff, could you open an application like PuTTY, which will let you select other types of networks and just talk to the board?
Yeah, that should work. It has a discovery protocol that runs on, let's see, I can't remember if it's UDP. I think it's UDP, but it speaks UDP and TCP/IP. You can certainly connect to it. I don't remember if we've actually documented the discovery protocol in one of the public documents or not, but if you want to experiment with that, I can dig that information up and get it to you. There's a whole API also. You can talk to it from a browser by just issuing post requests. So if you use something like Postman or Postwoman, which are little extensions that you can add to Chrome, to your Chrome browser, then you can actually form packets, data packets, and send it and see what the responses are, and interface to it that way. In fact, that's what we did during development to prove the API and of course to debug things when something wasn't working right.
Yeah.
Oh, are you showing? Yeah, so he's showing on screen, Michael's showing an example of this. We're opening, let's see, we're opening a port to issue a post, right?
Yeah, so the API exposes the wireless programming already through through these URLs. So you just go to the IP of the module, /propeller /load file !file. So you just need to add the binary data in this case to the post request and just send it through the browser. There's another API for let me think so you can upload a file, or you can send the binary bytes, hex bytes. You can do various other things as well, including setting the module credentials. So pretty much all of the key features or commands of the module are exposed through this API as well.
And they're documented in the one of the documents that's on the downloads page for the product on our website. So you can see what other web or I should say internet or serial APIs are exposed. Michael,
Yeah.
does that post command naturally support the P2 loader already?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So you can use that from Proptool when you're ready.
Nice. So
but
just,
actually, the one thing we were thinking might be beneficial is because now we can send, if you probably would just add another API call to accept base 64 encoded, because then you can do that on the Propeller tool side, and then just send over base 64 encoded stream, which is, you know, a couple times, bit more than a couple times, you know, less data to travel over the Wi-Fi network then, or the TCP, TCP packets. So that will speed up transmission and hopefully improve reliability as well. Yeah. So, but yeah, it's exposed as is. You can just send over a standard Propeller tool output binary file.
okay.
And it'll load the P2. Yeah.
So
once we have the module with the ESP module on the back, then it'll you know, with the embedded programming environment, then it'll all just be there.
Yeah. For the P1, the Propeller 1, when the ESP programs it, you send the package, the application image, to it through that post command. And then it actually has a built-in Propeller 1 loader. Or not a, well, yeah, it is sort of a loader. It knows how to speak the language of the Propeller 1 to download the application to it and ensure that it's there. And then gives responses back to the host about whether it was successful or not. I'm not sure exactly what it does in this case. It's probably a lot more simple, where it's just essentially sending the raw data right through to the Propeller 2.
Yeah, it's much simpler. I mean, really the Propeller 2 protocol and, you know, baud rate does away with the need for the microloader, because we can upload to the P2 at 2 meg. But so what this does behind the scenes, when you drop that file, the binary file, it base 64 encodes it into a buffer and then streams it out to the P2 at the baud rate that you've set in the settings of the Wi-Fi modules. So yeah, it's super quick. I don't think we need the microloader for this application. Although that's one of the other reasons for having this functionality on the eval, is that we can experiment with faster loading serial protocols, because, you know, you don't just, it's not just Wi-Fi modules that you can plug into that header now. You can plug in other serial modules which may run at faster baud rates. The P2 chip itself is limited to a 2 meg programming baud because of its internal oscillator. But if you did upload a microloader, a small piece of code which then engaged, you know, the 20 megahertz crystal and chose a high frequency, you could then upload the rest of your program at a very high rate. And of course, that experimentation we could do now through the same header on the eval board. So yeah, this is all kind of the first step towards exciting things. But ultimately, the P2 code is quite compact anyway. So I suppose if you're mass programming devices, they might be something to be gained by programming at 20 megahertz instead of, you know, 2. But it's so fast anyway that who knows? I'm sure there'll be applications for faster loading, but we just haven't thought about them yet.
Should we talk at all about our long-term hope for this whole topology?
I'm not sure if that's top secret or not.
I don't care.
That's up to you. Well, you know, ultimately the design ongoing at the moment is a module with an ESP on the back, ESP Wi-Fi module on it, with embedded. So you'll actually program your code on a web page. Basically, you won't need any Windows Propeller tool or anything. You just open up your browser, browse to the module, and there's your code. In Propeller tool will basically be on Chrome, and it'll work with therefore any computer, Chromebooks, Macs, everything that can connect by internet you can connect to the module, you can type your spin code, or you can copy paste it into the module directly through a web page, save it on the module if you like. Yeah, so basically it'll be like Propeller Tool if you like, you know, on a web browser. So it'll be an all-in-one solution. You won't need you won't need to worry about which computer you've got. It just wipes out all of that issue. It becomes a non-issue because you just connect by Wi-Fi and use any computer you like.
Let's ask people, let's see, if you stop sharing your screen, then we can see more people, right? Why don't we ask them if they think that this is going to be viable? I mean, maybe there's some technical thing that they're aware of that we're not. I mean, it should work in theory, but in practice, is there going to be any stumbling block? Or is there any reason why someone wouldn't want it to work this way? I'm just curious what people would think about it.
Jeff, could you stop my sharing, please? Because I can't, my screen sharing.
Okay, let's see.
You have the power.
Yeah, I just can't find it. Oh, there we go. Okay, I found it. Whew, now I see you.
All right, now we're good. Now I've got, okay, now I've got a chat window back. I can see what you've all been talking about.
So does anyone have any opinion on the viability of doing this? Or the desirability of doing this?
Yeah, I like it. I've been doing a lot of work with the WX badge, writing programs on a laptop and downloading them wirelessly and debugging wirelessly, because you can send the serial stuff ends up in the spin tool terminal or whatever. It's great. I really prefer that to plugging the badge into the laptop.
Yeah, and by the way, it wouldn't prevent somebody, as long as there's a way to connect to the Propeller, it wouldn't prevent them from using any other of their favorite editors. But what we wanted to do was make it so that, you know, right out of the box, you can get going right away, and anywhere you're traveling, you hopefully have access to a web browser and a source of power and can program it. Yeah, and the principle is that the wireless module would serve a bunch of JavaScript code, I believe, up to your web browser in your device. And then that would execute the code that would realize the development system, the debugging tools, and all that kind of stuff. So it's not like it's just serving a screen. It's actually using your computer or phone or whatever you've got, which has a lot more resources than the chip itself does. You know, it has more memory, more display capability, more mass storage, more internet connectivity, so that it can leverage all that to provide a nice development environment that works on everything, hopefully without any kind of compatibility issues. And it gets rid of wires in the process. And USB drivers. Yeah, everything gets rid of all that mucky muck that we've constantly had trouble with. Everything that we bang our head with over and over.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing we're going to bang our heads over then is going to be browser compatibility and all that good stuff. But now the Edge has gone Chrome behind the scenes, and if we just develop with Chrome and stick to that, I think life will be as good as it can be.
Probably a silly question, but we would still be able to save locally, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the idea is that it can use your machine as a compute device and as a storage and user interface and internet access device.
I think the only worry for me would be that if we ever let the tools support language features on this versus the standard tool set, if you try and create a draw from one tool to the other, or we have to do it network-based, that'd be really bad. As long as the language compilers on the system compilers and this web-based compiler stayed in sync, I don't see any issues. And it's a nice feature. As you're saying, for traveling, it's wonderful. Yeah, and one of the things that's really attractive to me about it is that we have a lot of educational customers. These are students of all ages,
And all this stuff that ends up causing you stumbling points just to get going, you know, installing a USB driver, or the school has things locked down to keep the kids safe, that stuff constantly causes problems. We're always getting calls and walking people through the steps to try to resolve it. We're hoping that this makes it a little bit more natural and fewer steps and less calls.
I could imagine that it's going to be wonderfully entertaining if every student has their own hotspot they're connecting to from a network standpoint within the classroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if we have, well, we do have at least one
Lots of
classroom.
great stuff is going to happen for the teachers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the teacher might have to move just a new router into his classroom just to circumvent all the admin policy that's in effect on their main network.
Yes. And that could be frowned on. But
That
as long as you're not forwarding the internet, then it shouldn't be too much of an issue.
Does anyone have any opinion on how we should approach this effort?
Well, I have a question based on what Stephen just said. So this will still require, you know, a separate router. So you're going from the module through a router to your PC wirelessly, not point to point. So I wouldn't be able to program on an airplane. Not that I do very often. People get nervous when you start pulling wire.
It could be point to point.
It can.
Oh,
be
it can.
point to point
Okay.
as
Yeah,
well.
it could
Yeah.
do both.
But you won't have internet then, because this.
Yeah, I
will
don't
be
care
the
about
only
that.
connection.
Yeah, if I'm on a plane, I don't care. I don't have internet anyway.
Well, you know, you can use two USB Wi-Fi dongles, and then you could have internet through one and connect to the, you know, P2 with the other. So it's
Right.
still possible.
Yeah. USB Wi-Fi dongles are cheap and easy.
Yeah.
So is it, I think we were talking that it seems like we would write this code in JavaScript because that's what runs on browsers. Is that right?
Probably TypeScript, which is derivative, but it's much more well typed, and there are great tools in VS Code to have you write really stable, rock solid code. So TypeScript is JavaScript, but strongly typed.
Yeah, because I think JavaScript just has one numeric type and it's like an extended or something, right?
I couldn't tell you, but I've been writing in TypeScript, and I have wonderful automations. There are GitHub automations, all sorts of things for you.
Okay, TYPE script.
Correct.
Here's a little example of a portable access point. You can see this one I haven't even peeled the little shipping protector off of. It's it's just something I found on Amazon. There's a number of these things available that I just power it up, do a little configuration, and then I can connect my Wi-Fi module to it, and my computer can connect to the Ethernet directly if I want, or it can connect to it wirelessly also.
And it looks like there's a USB connection on there too. Is that for just power?
Yes, that's exactly right. That's for just power. There might be some kind of configuration you can do over it, but I kind of doubt it. I bet it's all wirelessly done.
And does the RJ45 supply power, or is that just?
It is possible, but I don't know that this module supports that. If it works over PoE, power over Ethernet, then it would, but I doubt it.
You wouldn't get that out of your computer anyway. You'd need that out of a switch or something.
Yeah, but you could probably power this from your computer using the USB connector.
And then
we lost your audio.
Yeah, there we go. The newer one is even smaller, so even better for traveling. It comes with the requisite cables.
Nice.
USB or you know, network if you want to use.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of options around for this. I haven't tested them all.
That's the smallest one I've got. That's a Wi-Fi access point for your laptop. So it doesn't get much smaller than that. On on an airplane, for example, as John mentioned, that's probably the way to go.
That one can actually serve as...
You start getting that out on an airplane, they'll be worried with the wires.
Hey, speaking of airplanes,
especially the blinky lights.
I want to tell you guys a quick airplane story. Just a few minutes ago, I don't know, maybe an hour ago, some plane was coming into LAX at 3,000 feet, and the pilot reported to the tower. 2 pilots reported to the tower that they saw a guy in a jetpack at their elevation.
Right.
Yeah, I saw that on the news.
Something like 300 yards out, and then one of the other pilots was like only in LA. Yeah.
I would think, I hope that guy has a parachute, because if that thing were to fail, he'd sure fall a long way.
Very Darwinian, though, but
Pretty sure the jet engine manufacturers aren't testing human-sized loads through engines.
Yeah. Hey, so for TypeScript, does anyone have, like, maybe Stephen, would you have any idea about, is there any, like, how would we get started on writing that code, and what would it look like, and what, like, can you give us like a mental template of how that works?
You can talk to Jim Ewald. He knows about TypeScript. And,
I've also, yeah, you can also check out my Iron Sheep, my company name, repos on GitHub. I have a couple Loveless cards. I work with Home Assistant, home automation stuff. And so I added a couple cards to their system, and they're all written in TypeScript. So yeah, we can, it's pretty easy actually. I use VS Code as my, as people have mentioned in this chat already, VS Code. And there are wonderful extensions for TypeScript for formatting and for validating and spell checking and all sorts of things. And adhering to layout standards.
So TypeScript runs in browsers, or it creates something that runs in browsers, right?
Yes.
It's a form of JavaScript, Chip.
It's a layer on top of JavaScript, providing stronger typing. So it's kind of a
right. Okay.
Yeah, it's like a pre-compiler.
I think it gets compiled into standard JavaScript.
It does.
Right. Okay, so it's at the end, it's still JavaScript.
Right. In the end, though, the tools compress it and tokenize it, so the JavaScript files are very small.
Good.
As many as they can be to optimize uploads.
Because they're interpreted anyway. They're not even really compiled.
Correct.
Okay, so that's good. So, okay, that's what we need to do. It sure would be cool to start all, like, just pick up all of our current development efforts and just start sliding it over that direction.
So the same guy that developed Delphi, Chip, is the guy that wrote TypeScript.
Oh.
Enders.
And it also gets usually compiled, just in time compiled, so it's interpreted once basically and cached.
Oh, okay.
Similar to Python. Python gets compressed and just in time compiled and cached as a compiled unit.
I see.
So for instance, my test environment under VS Code, the environment runs in Docker. It's running a Docker container. I compile the code. As soon as I save the file, the tools automatically run. They expose the runtime JavaScript via a local port on my machine. And then from my environment that I want that JavaScript to be seen, I just point to that local port and I'm automatically seeing the updated code every time I save files. And so it's really clean and easy to work with. We've all been writing code for many years, and this was one of the easier adjustments for me to make to the language.
So you keep using, go ahead, Bob.
No, I was just gonna say there's also a lot of tools that take Delphi code and convert it automatically to JavaScript.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Is TypeScript, how would you explain TypeScript as a language? Is it similar to anything else?
Well, JavaScript, it's an extension to JavaScript.
Yeah, JavaScript with type enforcement, really.
Yeah. A structured form.
It sort of has C-like syntax with the braces and whatnot.
Here, I'll give you a link to one of my files here. You'll bear with me.
Much like how C++ originally was a preprocessor which produced C code, which then ran through a C compiler, TypeScript is a pre-JavaScript language with type checking that gets compiled into standard JavaScript and then run by.
Okay, that makes sense.
The files instead of JS are TS suffix by convention. And so I put a link to one of my files so you can just do a quick link and look at the source code. This is a heavily templated project, and so I include stuff they're providing and just make my adaptations. So you can see what the things look like. In my case, I'm running a I2C attached lightning detector chip, and then I have JSON payloads being sent across via MQTT, and this thing's taking the MQTT it receives, the JSON payloads, and displaying things. If you go to the root of the detector, you'll see that what the visual UI looks like, the root of that repo. So it's simple to read, as you can see. It's pretty natural syntax, reasonable error checking, wonderful mixing HTML and other things in line, and string handling is all easy. Same thing with JavaScript.
I've used JavaScript a lot recently, not TypeScript though, but and there's things I love about it, some things I hate about it, but overall,
I like any language.
Right, like any language. Overall, I've really enjoyed, except for the hair-tearing moments, really enjoyed programming in JavaScript. I just dislike all the issues that I've had trying to get good, solid access to the serial port through every version of Chrome that gets released.
So what we would do is we would take the output of this. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
We would take the output of the TypeScript, which is going to be like terse JavaScript, and we would put that into our ESP8266, or is that what's called, ESP8266 module, and then that would serve. It would just simply send that up to the web page,
right,
or as a web page, right, and then
as well as some HTML and some CSS.
Okay, to frame it in.
Yeah.
Yeah, but HTML and CSS can all be embedded. You'll see in that repo a whole bunch of config files which tell the tools how to process it. I was hoping that maybe I could show you the what the resulting file looks like. Thought maybe it was versioned there, maybe it's not.
It doesn't have to be pretty, it just has to be small, right?
And it's not pretty, it's very tiny.
Did you say at the root in the README, that's the image I'm looking at, the lightning detector image?
Yes.
is what the UI looks like?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what the code is doing, is actually coloring the rings and putting up the rings and interpreting the JSON payloads to put content in the rings. I have another one, which is just right alongside that repo, you'll see an RPI monitor card, which is essentially a dashboard for all your Raspberry Pis or Omega 2 IoT devices.
Is it fair to say that with JavaScript and TypeScript, you can create nice UIs that then have access through the, I guess, the wireless functionality? When I was working at a cyber company with Ryan Clark, who was on last week a bit with us, I created a portable RFID reader using a Raspberry Pi and an off-the-shelf hacker reader. And our wireless guy used JavaScript to create a little phone app that would talk to the Raspberry Pi. And he actually made the UI look like he was shopping on Amazon. so that if we went into a building, this is part of our jobs, of course, and scanned somebody's credentials without them knowing, on the phone, it looked like you just put something in your shopping cart at Amazon. It was really neat.
That's wonderful. How to stay anonymous.
Yeah. Yeah. Keep secrets from the shoulder surfers. Jeff, can I ask a couple of questions on Propeller Tool?
Sure.
I may have asked these in the online, but one of the things I like about the basic stamp editor is, since we have different basic stamps, is that we can have favorite folders for the BS1 and the BS2, which I still actively use both. Could we do that? You know, have a directory section on the F5 page like we have in the BS2? So yeah, I can set a base folder. Like, you know, for example, for me, it's on my D drive, I have a programming folder, and I have P1 spin and P2 spin 2 folders where I separate out my source files.
Yeah, and you want to be able to
tell the editor that, so that if it doesn't know where I want to go, it'll at least start there.
Are you talking for library access, or
no, for applications?
Yeah, just for browsing around to open up files.
Yeah.
In fact, at one point, I think I started showing the favorites feature in the Propeller tool.
Yeah.
So I could plug it into that so that we can, you can create your own favorite.
Well, what I was hoping is, since you have code in the basic stamp editor, that some of that could migrate over easily and, have that same kind of functionality. Because I use all the time open from, and I'm saying, geez, I hope I opened from my P2 folder so that I can just do it. Otherwise, I got to navigate through the system to get it into the list.
Yeah. In fact, I think I intended for that to be possible a long time ago, and I don't think there's no option in preferences to do that, I believe. So I think that I could probably add that feature fairly easily, because the structure to access it outside of preferences is already there. Okay. So that it would show up in that little top list of favorites.
Oh, that'd be great.
You'd be able to
all the time. Yeah, exactly. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, regardless of the last 20 files you've opened. Like, you would always be able to get to it. Yeah, that's...
Well, and as you indicated, I'm doing a lot of porting from P1 to P2, and I'm keeping file names the same. And sometimes, I trip over myself saying, what's happened? Oh, I opened the spin 1 version, and I wasn't looking at the code, try to compile it, and I got a problem. So.
Yeah.
Okay. That might tie quite nicely with the preprocessor if def, if else, hash if def. Is that something?
Oh, are we going to get that?
Hopefully.
Yes. How about include?
Don't listen to me though, Jeff.
I do intend to add some pre-processing capability that's configurable to you. So in particular, one thing I really want is for the tool to have a way to tell, what version or what propeller what it's intended for. Probably similar to how we did it in basic stamp source that John's quite familiar with.
Yeah, you'll notice in my examples, I already have that in there, hoping that you do it the same way you did the basic stamp.
So they'll just naturally work.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's a favorite way of mine, so it'll probably happen that way. And
I was hoping that.
Unless Chip disagrees with it, I'll have to run it by him.
Anything's fine with me.
Excellent. Done.
Well, we've reached past the 2-hour point here, so I think I'm going to stop the recording, which I will do right